something is quietly taking shape as the Philadelphia Eagles approach the 2026 NFL Draft, and if you've really been paying attention to how this front office operates, you can feel that this isn't just another routine draft cycle. There's a very clear sense that Howie Roseman is once again positioning himself to be aggressive, flexible, and maybe even unpredictable when the moment arrives. Right now, the Eagles are sitting with 9 total draft picks, including number 23 overall in the first round, followed by picks at 54, 68, 98, 114, 137, 153, 178, and 197. That's a lot of ammunition, and if we know anything about Howie, it's that he rarely stands still. He's going to move up, he's going to move back, and he's going to look for ways to stack assets, not just for this year, but for the future as well. That's always been part of his DNA, and heading into this draft, that mindset feels stronger than ever. But here's where things start to get really interesting. There's a growing belief that one of the biggest questions surrounding this team right now revolves around the wide receiver position, and more specifically, what happens if A.J. Brown is no longer part of the long-term picture. Because if the Eagles decide to go wide receiver early in this draft, especially in round 1, that could be a major signal that something bigger is coming. At the same time, there's a lot of confidence internally about DeVonta Smith. The belief is that he can truly step into a wide receiver 1 role and thrive with a larger workload. He's been incredibly talented, arguably underutilized, and there are people who think he can carry a much bigger share of the offense if given the opportunity. To support that idea, the team has already added complementary veterans like Hollywood Brown and Elijah Moore, which suggests they're preparing for different scenarios. Still, if A.J. Brown were to be moved, the impact on the receiving core would be undeniable. That's why the idea of drafting a wide receiver early isn't just about adding talent, it's about potentially reshaping the entire identity of the offense. And there are names to watch. Jordan Tyson is one of the most talked about prospects, a player with undeniable upside but also serious durability concerns. Then you've got guys like My Lemon, who bring slot versatility and comparisons to elite route runners, and Denzel Boston, a bigger-bodied receiver with strong hands and red zone ability. There's also Casey Concepcion, dynamic after the catch, and Omar Cooper Jr., a physical, stocky playmaker who can create yards in space. If the Eagles wait until day 2, there's still plenty of depth. Players like Ted Hurst, Antonio Williams, and Jacoby Lane offer different skill sets, from perimeter threats to slot specialists. It's a deep class, and that gives Howie options. But while everyone is talking about wide receivers, you can't ignore what has always been the foundation of this team: the trenches. The offensive line and defensive line have defined the Eagles' success for years, and there's a strong expectation that this philosophy isn't going anywhere. In fact, after an injury-plagued season and uncertainty surrounding veterans like Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson, there's a real possibility that the Eagles prioritize the offensive line early in this draft. If the board is close between a skill player and a lineman, the tiebreaker could very well go to the big men up front, and when you look at potential targets, there's a wide range of options. From high upside prospects like Max Ahanakor, who is still raw but incredibly gifted, to experienced players like Blake Miller, who bring stability and consistency. There are also versatile linemen who can play multiple positions, which is something the Eagles always value, because here's the reality: this offense will only go as far as the offensive line takes it. If the unit stays healthy and performs at a high level, this team has the potential to be a serious contender. But if that group struggles, it affects everything: the run game, the pass protection, and even the implementation of a potentially evolving offensive scheme under Nick Sirianni. Now, add another layer to all of this: the possibility of a trade up. This is where things could really shift. Howie Roseman has a history of being aggressive when he identifies a player he truly believes in, and one name that keeps coming up is Jordan Tyson. If the Eagles view him as a top 15 talent and he starts slipping into the late teens or early 20s, don't be surprised if they make a move. That's exactly the kind of calculated risk Howie has taken before, but it's not without concerns. Tyson's injury history is extensive, including multiple serious setbacks over the years. When he's on the field, the production is there. The route running, the separation, the ability to make plays, it's all there. But the question is whether he can stay healthy long enough to reach that potential. So now you're looking at a draft strategy that could go in multiple directions. Wide receiver early could signal a major roster shift, offensive line investment could reinforce the team's identity, and a trade-up could change everything in an instant, and that's what makes this moment so fascinating. The Eagles have options, they have flexibility, and they have a general manager who isn't afraid to take bold swings. So as we get closer to draft night, the big question becomes this: are the Eagles preparing for a quiet reload, or are they on the verge of making a move that completely reshapes the direction of this roster? What do you think is really going on here? And if you really think about everything we just laid out, this is where the strategy starts to feel less like speculation and more like a calculated setup for something bigger. Because when you connect the dots, the Eagles aren't just preparing for one outcome, they're building flexibility for multiple scenarios to unfold during draft night. Now let's go deeper into that trade-up possibility, because this is where things could flip the entire script. Howie Roseman has consistently shown that he doesn't just react to the board, he anticipates it. When he identifies value, especially at a premium position, he's willing to strike. And that's exactly why the situation around Jordan Tyson feels so important. This is a player who, when you turn on the tape, looks like one of the most dynamic receivers in the class. He creates separation, he can win outside his frame, and he gives his quarterback a reliable target in contested situations. At around 6'2", he has the size you want, and while he's not considered an elite burner, he has more than enough speed and quickness to be effective at the next level. There are even comparisons being made to Stephon Diggs because of his route running ability and fluid athleticism. But here's the other side of that coin, and it's something you can't ignore. The injury history is real, and it's extensive. We're talking about a torn ACL, MCL, and PCL earlier in his college career, followed by a broken collarbone, ankle issues, and lingering hamstring problems. He has never played a full, healthy season. That's not just a minor concern. That's a defining factor in how teams evaluate him. And yet, despite all of that, the production when he's on the field tells a completely different story. In one of his most productive seasons, he put up over 100 yards and double-digit touchdowns, showing exactly what he can be at his best. Even in a limited 2025 campaign, he still managed over 700 yards and 8 scores. That's the kind of output that makes teams believe the upside is worth the risk. So now put yourself in Howie Roseman's position. You're sitting at pick 23, and Tyson starts to slide. Maybe he's still there at 20, maybe even 18. Do you stay patient and hope he falls to you? Or do you package some of those 9 picks, move up a few spots, and secure a player you believe could be a game changer? That decision could define this entire draft. And it also ties back to something the Eagles have done extremely well in recent years: drafting replacements before they become urgent needs. We've seen it time and time again. They don't wait until a position becomes a crisis. They act early, they stay ahead, and they trust their evaluations. If there's even a possibility that a major change is coming at wide receiver, this would fit that pattern perfectly. But at the same time, you can't ignore the alternative path. If the Eagles decide that the risk is too high, or if Tyson is taken earlier than expected, the focus could shift right back to the trenches. And honestly, that might be the safer route, because building through the offensive line has always been the backbone of this organization. And with questions surrounding durability, age, and long-term stability at key positions, investing in that unit could pay off immediately and in the future. There are players in this class who could step in, develop behind veterans, and eventually take over starting roles. That kind of continuity is exactly what has kept the Eagles competitive year after year. And don't forget, this isn't just about one pick. With 9 selections, the Eagles have the ability to address multiple needs. They can take a calculated risk early, then come back and add depth at wide receiver, offensive line, or even other positions on day 2 and day 3. That's the advantage of having this kind of draft capital. So when you step back and look at the full picture, this draft feels like a turning point, not necessarily because of one player, but because of the decisions that are about to be made. Do they lean into a potential offensive shift by targeting a wide receiver early? Do they double down on their identity in the trenches? Or do they make an aggressive move that signals something bigger behind the scenes? Everything is on the table. And that's why these next 2 weeks are going to be critical. The rumors, the smokescreens, the last-minute evaluations, it's all part of the process. But when the clock starts ticking on draft night, we're going to find out exactly what this front office truly believes about this roster. And even beyond those 2 main paths, there's still another layer to this that hasn't gotten enough attention, and that's how the Eagles could manipulate the board not just in round 1, but across the entire draft. Because when you have 9 picks, you're not locked into anything. You can afford to take chances, you can afford to miss on one move if it means hitting big on another, and that's where Howie Roseman becomes even more dangerous compared to other general managers around the league. Think about it like this: if the Eagles don't trade up in the first round, they could easily become a team that trades back instead. Let's say the board doesn't fall the way they want at 23. Instead of forcing a pick, they could slide back a few spots, pick up an extra second or third round selection, and still land a player in the same tier. That's something we've seen them do before, and it's part of how they continue to reload the roster without completely resetting it. Now imagine combining that approach with their needs. You could see a scenario where they pass on wide receiver early, load up on offensive or defensive line talent, and then attack the receiver position in rounds 2 or 3 where there's still legitimate upside. Players like Antonio Williams or Jeremy Bernard could come in and contribute right away in specific roles, especially if the offense is adjusted to spread the ball around more. And that brings us back to the bigger picture of what this offense might look like in 2026. Because this isn't just about replacing players, it's about evolution. If the Eagles are truly planning adjustments under Nick Sirianni, then the type of players they bring in will reflect that. Maybe they prioritize versatility, maybe they want more yards after catch ability, maybe they're looking for receivers who can create separation quickly to fit a faster paced system. All of that matters when you're evaluating these draft decisions. And then there's the quarterback factor. Jalen Hurts is still the centerpiece of this offense, and everything ultimately revolves around putting him in the best possible position to succeed. A strong offensive line helps him, reliable weapons help him, scheme adjustments help him, so every move the Eagles make in this draft is indirectly tied to maximizing his performance. That's why this draft isn't just about filling holes. It's about shaping the identity of the team moving forward. And let's not overlook the psychological aspect of all this. When you're a veteran in that locker room and you see the front office being aggressive, making moves, investing in key areas, it sends a message. It tells the team that the organization is committed to winning right now, not just building for the future. That kind of energy can carry into training camp, into the regular season, and into the way this team responds to adversity. So whether it's a bold trade up, a disciplined approach in the trenches, or a strategic move back to gain more assets, every decision is connected